Bleach TYBW Cour 3 has been an exciting journey, but unfortunately all journeys must come to an end. But this cour does not end on a sour note. No, this cour ends on a massive high because Bleach TYBW episodes 39 and 40 were extremely entertaining to watch. This was a great finale in my opinion. We got a lot of great content in this finale, from Askin Naklavar to Yoruichi's sweet goodness, a bunch of lore inclusions having to do with Soken Ishida, Ryukin Ishida, Uryu, the fathers coming in, clarity on Uryu's goal, changes and movements in the story, and the setup for the finale. It has been so good to see Bleach back in full force, and Cour 3 has given us a bunch of amazing battles, from Ichigo vs Yuha, Ichigo vs Uryu, Yuha vs Ichibei, Uryu vs Renji, Shinsui. It's just been a blast, this cour, and I'm so sad that it's coming to an end, but damn am I happy that it happened, and damn am I excited for what is to come in the future. So, let's talk about the episodes, starting with episode number 39. Episode 39 kicks off with some Mimihagi stuff happening. Now, if you're like me, your first instinct here is to wonder how and why Mimihagi is still active. I was under the impression that after Yuha took control of the Soul King and absorbed it, that Mimihagi would die. Jushiro is dead, but yet Mimihagi is still active. My understanding of the situation, and obviously this is pending full confirmation, this is just my understanding so far. My understanding so far is that after the Soul King died, Mimihagi came to be the one in control of keeping the balance, of keeping the world separate, being the linchpin. And what you saw at the beginning of this episode is sort of like a phasing where in the skies of Karakura Town, you could see Soul Society. As though, like, if you guys watched movie, I believe it was Bleach movie 1, where the worlds were phasing together because of whatever was happening, something similar is happening here. I believe I understand what's going on, and once we get to that section of the episode, I'll explain it in full detail. However, that was just that initial scene of the episode. Then we go into the opening, which I believe for those who watched it live in Japan, they got an extended opening, which will be revealed for us tomorrow, so we'll see how that goes. But coming out of the opening, we have Uryu being approached by Hashvoth at the Gate of the Sun. Now, because it's nighttime, Yuhabaha is currently asleep. And as he sleeps, his power transfers over to Yugrim Hashvoth. So Hashvoth right now is the one in control of the Almighty, even though, as we find out, he's not proficient in his usage of it. It's not being used at its full capabilities. However, he currently does have the Almighty. And the future that he sees in regards to Uryu Ishida is one that is very grim indeed. And so he's here to try and have Uryu confess to what he knows Uryu is trying to do. We then switch over to what's happening on the other side of the Varveld, and we run into the Shinigami going up against Gerard Valkyrie. Now, this is the group that is left in Byakuya, Soifone, Momo, Shinji, etc., like those groups of people. They've arrived at the foot of the castle itself when they're approached by Gerard Valkyrie. Now, the battle lines are drawn in between these two factions, and Renji Ibarra shows up. Now, Renji's here because, after his battle with Uryu, after being defeated by Uryu, the other Vizards who were also separated, in Hiyori, Hachi, and those guys, they managed to find Renji and they gave him the first aid he needed. Again, Hachi's there, and Hachi's an expert healer, so that's how Renji's still alive. The Vizards helped him. Good for the Vizards, they finally did something. That's good. So Renji's here and he's going to try to fight against Gerard. We then switch over to Askin Naklavar, who is seated with his arms crossed and he's talking. He's giving an explanation of the Quincy's and the Shustoffel specifically. He explains that Liabaro was the first Quincy to be given a shrift by His Majesty, and the Liabara is the leader of the Royal Guard. His position is unquestioned. And then you have people like Pranita Parkinjaws and Gerard Valkyrie, who says that those are two specific Quincy who weren't given shrifts by His Majesty, which then gave them power. They already had power, and His Majesty gave them shrifts that embodied the power that they had. And that there were rumors circulating along the Quincy space that those two individuals were body parts of the Soul King. Mimihagi being the hand of the Soul King, and Gerard Valkyrie being the heart of the Soul King. So there's your confirmation right there. Now we pan down to see who Askin's talking to, and he's talking to Ichigo Kurosaki face down on the floor. Now I'm going to stop here for a second to talk about Carpet Ichigo and whether that was a good choice to keep this or not. There's some people out there who claim that this shouldn't happen because Ichigo has attained so much power. Why is he getting defeated by pretty much anybody? And my take on that matter is that I understand the perspective of the people who don't want Ichigo to be perceived as a loser or losing in any regard. I do understand that. However, the important thing to note in this moment is that Askin Naklavar is not a loser. Askin Naklavar is no chump. he's actually very powerful. And in a straight contest of power, Ichigo would beat Asukin, sure, but Asukin Naklevar's death dealing is extremely broken, and Kubo needed to sell that. And unfortunately, he used Ichigo to sell it, but I don't really have a problem with that because the death dealing works on almost anybody. Yoruichi ends up coming to save the others, and we have this scene with Yoruichi versus Asukin. It's beautiful. You know, he starts likening her to Bambietta, and Yoruichi, even though she's never met Bambietta, she assumes that Bambietta must be beautiful if they're being likened to each other, and she activates her Shunko, which burns off her outer clothing. The camera pans around her. It's one of my favorite shots of the entirety of Thousand Year Blood War. I'm not even lying. I'm not even going to pretend like I'm trying to be professional here. I loved it. Thank you, Piro. Thank you for showcasing Yoruichi in all her stunning glory. Yoruichi then attacks Asukin and uses an ability called Shunko Raijin Senkei. And the animation for this sequence was just magisterial, stupendous. The amount of impact frames as Yoruichi made these orbs in a semicircular fashion around her, and then the explosion of the lightning energy, and then the explosion of the attack itself, all of that was just amazing. Mr. Endo was probably the one who animated that, and it was just divine. Amazing stuff. I loved it. After that, we switch gears to go look at what Gerard is up to, and essentially the Shinigami basically put the beat down on Gerard Valkyrie. Now, when I was watching this episode, it did strike me as a little odd because there were two things going on here. On one level, it's either that Gerard Valkyrie let himself get beat just so he could express his power, or the Shinigami who were present there were actually stronger than Gerard Valkyrie at the current level that he was. You know, when you think about the amount of people who were there, you got Byakuya post Soul King's Palace training, so that's extremely powerful, and Renji post Soul King's Palace training, that's also powerful. Obviously, you have Rukia there, Soifan, Momo, Shinji, but I'm not really counting them. I mean, except Rukia is powerful, but I'm not really counting them. It seemed as though Renji and Byakuya were the ones inflicting the most damage. So I suppose, at the level of power that Gerard Valkyrie initially was, Renji and Byakuya post Soul King's Palace training would be stronger than him in Shikai. That's a little crazy, but I guess that makes sense. In any case, he takes the hit and he keeps talking about this miracle thing, in that if salvation just appears randomly, some people might throw it away as saying, oh, it was just a one-in-a-lifetime thing, or it was just something that happened by chance. But for something to be a true miracle, it needs to happen in the midst of despair, where you have no other options, where the odds are stacked against you, like they are now. But before he can activate anything, deliberately anyway, Byakuya just knocks him down with a Senbon Zakura, and then he doubles down and knocks his helmet off. I thought for a second that he took Gerard Valkyrie's head off, and then he, quote, finishes the job by leaving Gerard Valkyrie in a pool of his own blood before they move. We cut back to Mimihagi, who I will reiterate is still active. I feel like the anime is making a very, very clear point to have us not forget that Mimihagi is still active. It's still active, and tremors start occurring around the different worlds. In the world of the living, tremors are happening, the world is shaking, it's happening in Wekumundo, and these rifts seem to be appearing up in the skies and in reality, literally. And if you remember, these rifts were caused by the imbalance of souls, that existed when the Quincy started killing Hollow. So it's a byproduct and it's a symptom of imbalance in the world. Now, my understanding of how this works out, and my understanding of what happened, is that after the Soul King died, Mimihagi took control of being the linchpin of the entire world. And even though he couldn't really do it as well as the Soul King himself could, it was good enough to keep realities together. But now that Mimihagi has been cut off from the source, and Yuha has been set up in his stead, Yuha is now the linchpin. Yuha is now the balancer. But here's the thing, it would seem that the handing over process hadn't completely happened. Because as you see the worlds continue to crumble and the rifts appear and there are tremors everywhere, Yuha Baha begins to resonate. And he is asleep, but he begins to resonate, and the aura that appears around Yuha then seemingly fades over and Mimihagi dissipates, and then the world goes back to normal. And so my understanding of the situation is that Mimihagi was initially in charge of keeping the balance, but being that it was cut off from the source, the imbalance started to cause tremors. But because Yuha Baha is now initiated as the new linchpin of the entire world, he then took over and everything, quote, went back to, quote, normal. So that's my understanding of that situation. Cutting back to Asukin versus Yoruichi, Yoruichi's younger brother in Yushiro shows up. Now Yushiro comes in and he engages in battle against Asukin. He goes in there and Asukin honestly underestimates Yushiro because Yushiro speed blitzes him and starts to punch the heck out of him before using Shunko, his fire version of Shunko, to knock Asukin away in a huge explosion. We cut to see what the Shinigami versus Gerard Valkyrie is up to, and they think they've defeated Gerard, and so they're running towards the castle when they see a massive foot almost step on them. They look up and they see Gerard Valkyrie looking massive. For the people who cared, Gerard Valkyrie is 2D. He's not 3D, he's 2D. We have dodged a massive bullet because I was so worried about the possibility of Gerard Valkyrie being 3D. It would have sucked if he was CGI, but no. He's not CGI, he's 2D, and I'm extremely happy that he is. Gerard Valkyrie's Shrift is M for Miracle, and it allows him to convert any damage that he's taken onto himself into physical size. And so the more damage you inflict on him, the bigger he will become. That's Gerard Valkyrie's ability. He starts to attack a bunch of different people. There's a spot where Momo and Shinji do something together. I know, it's crazy. Momo does something. She uses her Zanpakuto to create this platform, which then bounces them into the air, and then she uses Tobiyume right in Gerard Valkyrie's face, and it seems to not do zero damage. I mean, Gerard Valkyrie's not going to get defeated by that, or initially hurt by that, but she did something. That explosion was pretty cool, I suppose. And then Shinji uses Hado Nama 91 without an incantation, Senju Koten Taiho, and it hurts Gerard Valkyrie, but it doesn't do much else. But I still want to give him credit because he did use a Hado 91 level attack without an incantation. That is cool, no matter how you slice it. That's cool on Shinji's part. Good job. Going back to Asukin versus Yoruichi, Asukin utilizes his death-dealing ability to make himself immune to Yushiro's Ryatsu and proceeds to put 3 arrows in his chest. Now, I want to take this moment to talk about Asukin's death-dealing ability. So, the death-dealing ability of Asukin is essentially something that allows him to raise or lower the lethal dose of anything that he has been struck with Ryatsu-wise. Now, the lethal dose, scientifically speaking, the lethal dose is the minimum amount of a substance that's required to kill you. And so, for example, and again, I don't know what the literal number is, but let's just say it takes 3 milligrams of rat poisoning to kill a grown man. The lethal dose of rat poison is 3, meaning if we give you 1, you won't necessarily die. Now, if it's something that's going to hurt you, if it's going to damage you, yes, it will. But without hitting that lethal dose, you won't die, because the lethal dose to kill a man with rat poison is 3 milligrams. And so what Asukin now Clavora does in his battles is that if it's something that he can ingest, he'll ingest it, but he really just needs to be struck by it. He needs to be exposed to the Ryatsu of it. If Asukin becomes exposed to a particular thing, he can alter the lethal dose of the substance he's hit with to make it so that he's immune to it, or in specific situations, to make it so that it's poisonous to you. And so the way that would work is that after being hit by Yoruichi's Raijin Senkai, and after being hit by Yushiro's attack as well, now that he is exposed to it, he's able to raise the lethal dose to say, if we were to give Yoruichi's Raijin Senkai an attack potency of 1000 points, and give Yushiro's 800, I have now made the lethal dose required to kill me with Yoryatsu 2000, which means he's now immune to it. That's the way that death dealing works. It's an extremely intuitive ability, and I'm really glad that Kubo actually gave this ability because it's kind of interesting the way that it's utilized. And this concept of the lethal dose is a legitimate scientific ideology, and I like it when they weave real life science into some of these anime stuff. So I really like that. I did. At the end of the episode, you have Yugo attack Uryu. It causes an explosion in the side of the door. Uryu goes through that side, and unfortunately, or in my case, very fortunately, the person waiting on him on the other side is Ichigo Kurosaki. Their paths cross once again. And that is where the episode ends, but not before we get a post-credit scene. In this post-credit scene, there is a cemetery. It's raining, and it's nighttime. And there is a shadowy figure standing in front of a particular cross. Now, these crosses are kind of huge, actually. And the person standing there, as we come to find, is Ryukin Ishida. And standing behind him, a fair ways behind him, but still, standing on the other side, behind him, is Ichigo Kurosaki, who is in his Shinigami form. And for the record, Ryukin Ishida is also in his Quincy battle armor. And they're both standing there, and Ishin asks him if he's going to come along. Ryukin doesn't answer, but we know exactly what's going to happen. And I actually want to stop you for a second. I want to talk about Ryukin, because Ryukin Ishida is a very underrated character in Bleach, and somebody I wish we got more of, because there's so much depth and potential character in this one individual. He strikes me as such a tragic, pained man, because let's not forget how this started. Ryukin was initially meant to marry Masaki Kurosaki. He loved her at the time, in my opinion. Maybe you disagree, but I feel like Ryukin actually had feelings for Masaki, but he knew that Masaki did not want to marry him. And by the way, if you're worried about how I'm saying Masaki, a Japanese person told me that you don't say Masaki, is Masaki. That's why I'm saying that. I don't know why. They just told me and I'm believing them. So I don't say Masaki Kurosaki. I say Masaki Kurosaki. Anyway, I believe that Ryukin was in love with Masaki, but he knew that she didn't want to marry him. He knew that she wanted to marry for love, not for duty or responsibility. And you see what happened in the contents of the Everything But the Rain arc, her meeting Ishin and whatever happened there. Now, put yourself in his shoes. You're in love with a woman who you're meant to marry. However, the woman doesn't want to marry you, not because she doesn't like you per se, but she doesn't want to marry anybody out of duty. And then this other Soul Reaper, and again, they don't like Soul Reapers. Soul Reapers are the enemy. This enemy dude shows up. She ends up getting, quote, contaminated after being attacked by the Hollow. She's kicked out of the family because of what happened. She ends up marrying that man, and then you, granted, you find love in your childhood associate in Katagiri, and you end up truly loving Katagiri because she was there for you the entire time. She never abandoned you. She was a genuine, rock solid foundation for you to rely on. Perfectly fine. But not only do you lose your initial first love to another man, you then lose the person you ended up loving to Yuha's Ash Valen, and she's gone forever, leaving you with a son who's the spitting image of her. It's a very terrible position to be in. And I fervently believe that the reason Ryukin has such a strained relationship with Uryu is not because of what he did to Uryu's mom, which we'll talk about in the next episode, but also every time he looks at Uryu, he sees Katagiri, because Uryu looks a lot like his wife, and it hurts him to look, which is what strained their relationship. So for me, I think Ryukin is a character who needs some type of spin-off. Like, you know, like a Ryukin and Ishin spin-off would be so great because there's so much potential in the character there. But anyway, that's where the episode ends. So episode 39 for me, it was a great episode. Yoruichi Shihoin stole the show. The Mimihagi subplot continues and the fathers are inbound. Great stuff in my opinion. 9 out of 10. I loved it. From there, we go into episode number 40, the final episode of Bleach TYBW Cour 3. Now, this episode starts off with Ichigo versus Uryu 2. The contents of this episode are very thought-provoking, and they're very interesting, and there are a lot of concepts that are presented that I really like. But the episode overall, from a quality perspective, I feel was rather disappointing. I think, like, right now, I'm declaring whatever Takashi Hashimoto says in regards to quality, I am not listening to him anymore. This brother went on Blue Sky and said that after working on episode 40, which we assume it's episode 40, but after working on this episode, he cried because of completion and he grew and yada yada yada, and please watch the episode because it's the best. I'm like, this? Are you serious? This? Episode 40? No, dude, no. It was not nearly good enough. Not nearly good enough. Anyway, so Uryu and Ichigo have their battle. Yugurm beckons Uryu that if he's not a traitor, he should kill his friends right here, right now. He immediately goes into his Volt Soundish form and they start fighting. Now, as they clash, we get a flashback to Soken Ishida. Soken is writing in the journal that Uryu ended up reading, saying that the Emperor Yuha, he calls him Emperor, he claims that Yhwach will not forgive the world for abandoning the Quincy, and that he will try to destroy the world as they know it. And he beckons the Quincy's who are left in the world of the living to have the responsibility of defeating Yhwach when the time arrives. Now, I want to talk about this for a second here. This idea of Yhwach, the Emperor, and his lack of forgiveness. Because in episode 28 of Bleach, we learned what Yhwach's goal was, what it is that he was trying to accomplish. The whole deal in regards to Yhwach, something that I believe is a very good touch, by the way, is that the Soul King Adonais was a Quincy. That much is a fact. The Soul King Adonais was the first recipient of the almighty ability. That is also correct. Soul King Adonais could see the future, and so he knew what would happen in regards to the Quincy's being persecuted, the Quincy's being dying, and the Quincy's being blamed in the way that they have been in history. Adonais had a choice to make of who he would stand with, to either stand with the Quincy or stand with the Shinigami. Adonais made his choice. He chose to stand with the Shinigami, who then set up the Soul Reaper Soul System, and then turned around and betrayed him in what became known as the Original Sin. That's the chronological sequence of events here. Now look, Yhwach as a child, not being able to see, speak, feel, hear, and all the other features that you know of, he came to find that he had the ability to give off parts of his soul into others, and once that part of their soul went into them, whatever ailment was plaguing them would be healed, but after they died, it would come back to him. But get this, it's not merely his power that comes back to him. It's also their memories, but more importantly, their emotions. And so what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to paint a picture of Yhwach here. For every single person Yhwach shared his soul with, and we're talking thousands, maybe millions, I have no idea, but for every individual he shared his soul with, whenever it came back to him, he would not only get his power back, he would not only get their experiences and their knowledge back, he would also get their emotions. And one of the things that Yhwach was able to feel from them was this fear they had of death. These are the two pillars that form the foundation of Yhwach's character. One is the vengeance he feels for Soul King Adonais turning his back on the Quincy. And two, the despair he feels knowing how many people have this fear of death, and he has taken it upon himself to figure out a way to prevent the fear of death by destroying death itself and creating a world where death doesn't exist. These are the two pillars that form the essence of Yhwach's character. And Ryukin Ishida knows about that, and he's saying, and he's making the determination that Yhwach, who maybe thinks or wants you to believe that he's doing this for the betterment of the Quincy, is no savior of the Quincy at all. He's making the point that Yhwach only cares about vengeance right now, and will stop at nothing to destroy the world as we currently know it. Now, the nuance with the ideological differences between Ryukin Ishida and Yhwach here is that if I were to ask you, is Yhwach trying to destroy the world? The answer is yes, he is trying to destroy the world, but what world is he trying to destroy? He's trying to destroy the Soul Reaper Soul System world. This world, this artificially created world by the Soul Reaper nobles, that's what he's trying to destroy. He's not necessarily trying to destroy a life period. He's trying to destroy the world as it exists now to create a new one where the status quo is different. A new world where the rules are different, where Quincy's are no longer being the ones blamed for everything, where Quincy's don't have to be at the butt end of everything. And so Ryukin is correct, but he's still not all the way correct. Ryukin writes in his journal that he believes, and he is challenging the Quincy who were left in the world of the living to stand and stop Yhwach when the time comes. After that, we get a little bit of a time skip forward to the day of reckoning, the day Yhwach activated the Osvalen. Now, during that day, we all know the story. It's a rainy day. Masaki and Ichigo are out there walking. Grand Fisher attacks. Ichigo gets knocked out. Masaki is about to take on Grand Fisher, utilizing her blute. She realizes that she can't use it. She's left defenseless against Grand Fisher, and she dies. On the other side of town, Katsugiri and her aide are outside with Ishida. Now, to me, this is still kind of funny because for a day that's extremely rainy, it's kind of hilarious that everybody just happened to be outside. I thought that was funny. But anyway, Uryu and his mom are outside, and then Uryu falls down in a bed of flowers. And then Katsugiri starts to feel it, and she falls over her son. And then what we do is we cut off to the side, and we're looking at the puddle of water. So when we cut to this puddle, there is one initial aura on the screen, which I'll show you right now. There's an aura on the screen. I assume that that's the Osvalen ring in the sky. But then another aura shows up. I don't know what that one is. Much has been made as to how Ishida Uryu survived the Osvalen. When Uryu specifically had this conversation with Yuha, Yuha asked him, why are you still alive? Now, I'm saying this off the top of my head, I don't know this for sure, but I believe somebody might have asked Kubo how Uryu survived even though he was a mixed blood Quincy, and I believe Kubo said it's because of the antithesis. I'm not sure, so don't quote me on that. But regardless, whenever we talk about Quincy Shrift, it's important to understand that Yuha Baha, his process of giving a person a shrift, is that he looks into their soul and he sees an innate ability that they have on their own, and then he materializes it using his own power to draw it out. Kubo was the one who described that, and that's how it works. And the reason why that's relevant is that is why you'll often find that each shrift embodies the personality, the beliefs, and the character of the person. So for example, Baz B's shrift, the heat, is because Baz B is a hothead. Asnot's F for fear is because Asnot is a fearful person. Bambietta's E for explode is because Bambietta is explosive. G for gluttony because she eats a lot. You know, I can go down the list. All the Quincy Shrifts embody their character, and Uryu Ishida is no different. Uryu being given the antithesis means that Uryu's innate ability somewhere deep inside him has an antithetical essence to it. Yuha Baha just brought it out. So, I don't know exactly what that second piece of aura was, I don't know, but it is possible that Uryu's antithesis shielded him from the Ashvalen, and the way that they're visually showing us that it happened was using that aura. But again, unconfirmed, who knows. We come back to real time with Ichigo fighting against Uryu, and this part is rather interesting. Like, there's a scene where Uryu is sort of firing at Ichigo as he's running around. I thought that was really cool. At a certain point, and the context of this fight right now is that Ichigo is much more serious than he was before. He's actually taking the fight to Uryu in many ways. Ichigo fires a small Getsuga Tensho, which causes a bit of a distraction or whatever, but then what he does is he uses a Getsuga Tensho on the side of the Varvelt castle and cuts it in half. Casually. He casually cuts the top half of the Varvelt in half, and it just like falls on top of each other. It's absolutely insane. Another cool thing that they had Ichigo do in this episode is that Ichigo leaves his smaller Zangetsu, in my opinion, levitating in the air. He leaves it as bait so he can get closer to Uryu, but as it's in the air, again, this is all up to interpretation. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. But looking at it, it was either levitating with his Ryotsu in the air, or he had thrown it and it was moving in slow motion and he was just much faster than everything else. But I think he left it levitating in the air, charged up with his Ryotsu, because it was like shining gold with his golden Ryotsu. And then he hides himself in the smoke, gets up close to Uryu and knocks Uryu back. And then as he's walking, the sword falls into his hand. And so we can decide what we want to do with this, but I wouldn't be surprised if Ichigo is able to control the swords even when they're not literally in his hand. Like, again, Vasalordi Ichigo was able to just summon Tensa Zangetsu by a wave of his hand. I don't think it's crazy to assume that Ichigo can do something similar. I don't think it's crazy. Leaving that fight for a little bit, we cut to Gerard versus the Shinigami, and essentially there's this, and what's happening here is Sagasu is playing this super ominous music. It's actually crazy. It's really good. And as he's playing it, Gerard Valkyrie is going around destroying everyone. And Momo is hiding inside a building. Gerard Valkyrie is about to destroy the building when Momo is saved by Shinji and the other Vizards. They show up. The Vizards all don their masks and they're about to engage in battle against Gerard Valkyrie. Thank you very much, Kubo. The Vizards are about to do something. That's good. Give them a chance to show what they can do. They're not going to beat Gerard Valkyrie. They don't need to beat Gerard Valkyrie. Just do something. Do something. Thank you. We catch up to Yukio and Ririka, and where they're going is they go to Kukaku Shiba's house. My determination here is that they're going to get Ginjo and the others to come and join in the battle. Good for them there. But as they're there, and if you remember, Kukaku's house is not in the Serite. It's in the Ryukon district, or actually on the outskirts of the Ryukon district. And so while they're there, they look over to the Serite, and they see these giant lights striking the Shikanmaku, and piercing it, actually. And it's the feathers and the remnant of Leobaro's bird form, and they materialize on the ground into these smaller birds and they start wreaking havoc. As they're doing so, we have the return of Izuru Kida, who cuts them. The birds ask, who are you? And he says, who am I? I'm a dead man. And one other thing. This is just really important. One other thing. I would like to officially let everybody know that the final battle of Bleach that takes place in the Soul Society will not be red skies. It will be nighttime natural lighting. That, my friends, is great, great news. I didn't hate the red sky, but I absolutely hated the idea of a Yuha versus Isen happening with a red sky background. I was praying so hard for it not to happen, and my prayers have been answered. When the time comes, and it will, when Yhwach stands face to face with Isen Sosuke, when Ichigo is out there, and we're getting this 3v1 of Uryu, Ichigo, and Isen against Yhwach, it will not be with a red background. It will be natural lighting. That is great news for everyone. Good job. Anyway, we go into flashback. Another flashback. There was a lot of flashbacks in this episode. It's Uryu and Ichigo. I think they're at school, but technically maybe they're not, because like Ichigo usually wears like a school uniform, and he wasn't that time. But anyway, they were at school and they were having a conversation. Ichigo asks Uryu why he's coming to a school like this, because I assume the school that they're going to is like a public school, but then like Ishida is smarter and his dad's a doctor. Why aren't you going to a fancier school? And Uryu says, well, your dad's a doctor too. Why are you here? Which is a really good touch. Both Ichigo and Uryu's fathers, they're both doctors. Like Isen carries himself like an idiot. That guy is a medical professional. He's a doctor. And so is Ryukin. Isen is just doing like a private practice emergency doctor's place, whereas Ryukin is like the director of the hospital. Their specific professions, as similar as they are, embody the types of people that they are. Like Ryukin is probably super driven and meticulous, whereas Isen really just wanted something that he could do at home so he could take care of his family, whereas Ryukin probably just leaves Ishida to be taken care of by the help and the maids and whatnot. Anyway, so Uryu says he has no interest in becoming a doctor anymore after Ichigo mentions that, hey, usually kids of doctors want to be doctors. And Ichigo tries to understand why Uryu doesn't want to be a medical doctor anymore, and Uryu doesn't answer. And Ichigo does the most Ichigo thing ever, where he says, well, if you don't want to talk about it, I won't push it. A sense of maturity about Ichigo that I've always appreciated. We then get a monologue of Uryu Ishida himself telling us that he could never choose to become a doctor after witnessing what his father did. And we see a shot of little Uryu peering through a door looking at his father doing an operation, and the person that he's operating on is his wife, Katagiri. And Uryu witnessed him doing that, and that scarred him, and that is why he will never become a medical doctor. We come back to real time, and Uryu tries to tell Ichigo to leave. He gives him this Gate of the Sun key, tells him to go 5 stories below, and that there is a Gate of the Sun ready. Use this, escape, and leave. Obviously, Ichigo is not interested in leaving, and they have an argument. We learn that Uryu Ishida isn't evil. He's not trying to destroy the world or whatever. He's trying to do he's a double agent. He's trying to get close enough to Yhwach to kill him. And the thing that they do in this scene, which is different from the manga, is that in the manga, Uryu was placing these small devices around the Varveld, and the reason he gave is that they can only be activated by his Ryotsu. But that's taken away in this scene. They've dropped that subplot. Instead, Uryu says that only he can defeat Yhwach because he's the only one who inherited both his master and his mom's blood. And so that's something that only he can do. Now this is extremely confusing, yet extremely exciting. What is Uryu talking about here? What does he mean that the reason why he's the only one who can finish this is because he's the one who inherited his master's blood and his mom's blood? Now, I wish I could tell you exactly what is happening here. One idea that I have here is that knowing what we know in the final battle, we know that Soken seemingly wrote in his journal, if you combine the silver residue and the blood of Ashvalan victims with Yuha's blood, it can momentarily stop his powers. And so, right now I'm going to go Galaxy Brain Heroes. What I'm saying might not make sense, but the rule is that when the Ashvalan is activated and a person is struck by it, there is a reishi residue left in their blood, which is called silver, and when it's harvested, it's called the still silver. And if you mix the still silver with the blood of the person who activated the Ashvalen, you can momentarily stop their powers. Uryu Ishida is a mixed blood Quincy because Katsugiri was a half-blood. She wasn't a pure Quincy. She was mixed blood. And so he does have her power. And Katsugiri was struck by the Ashvalen. And so she had distilled silver in her blood, which is why Ryukin Ishida was operating on her so he could harvest distilled silver. Which, by the way, in a prior episode, we have seen Ryukin Ishida holding distilled silver. He's already got it. And so the plan is in motion. If the rule here states that you must mix distilled silver with the blood of the person who activated it, Uryu Ishida, during his initiation ritual, had a cup full of Yuha's blood that he ingested. And so as of right now, Uryu Ishida has Yuha's blood inside him. And so I'm wondering if there is a way where all these different subplots tie together. I'm extremely confused. It piqued my interest for sure, but I really have no idea where they're going to go. I've essentially just presented you with some details and some ideas, and ultimately you'll have to decide for yourself what you want to do with that. And I can't wait for this subplot to be fully realized in Cour 4. Before they can get any further, Jurgrim arrives, and he has seemingly seen the future, and so he knows the truth about Uryu Ishida. But he lets a line slip. He says, before your majesty awakens, I'm going to kill you. This is what tells Uryu that Yuha is currently asleep and does not have the Almighty right now. So he tells Ichigo, you need to go, take care of business against Yuha. I'll stay here and fight against Hasfalth. Now, the interesting thing about Hasfalth's usage of the Almighty is that they clearly establish that Jurgrim Hasfalth cannot utilize the Almighty to its full potential, because he's not Yuha. Not only can he, and the way they visually represent this is that the eyes constantly shift from being blue to red, as if he doesn't quite have as much control over it. Furthermore, the fact that Hasfalth actually says that you look like you're so full of hope right now, and Uryu says, well, you couldn't see that I was going to be so full of hope, which means that your ability to use this power is limited, and Hasfalth didn't really have a comeback for that. So there are limitations. It's kind of twofold in a way, because on one level, I believe that it's possible that the antithesis gives Uryu somewhat of a blind spot to Yuha's ability, because it is the antithesis. And so even though we could interpret Hasfalth's inability to see all of Uryu's future as him just not being able to use the Almighty well, we can't rule out the possibility of Uryu's antithesis being what is making it complicated for Hasfalth, if that makes any sense. In the final sequences of the episode, the fathers arrive. Isshin Kurosaki and Ryukin Ishida are on the scene. They're there presently, and they're going to jump into the battle. I'm extremely excited to see what new things we're going to give these characters. Who are they going to fight? Are they going to join their sons? Are we going to have scenes of them fighting together? Yes, absolutely 100% yes. The final battle lines are being drawn. Gerard Valkyrie against the Visors and the Shinigami. You have Toshiro Hitsugaya heading towards the scene. Mayuri Kuretsuchi still in the tank healing up. Shunsuke Kurotoku is out. He can't return to battle right now. And Ichigo, Chad, and Orihime are headed towards Yuha throne room, with Yuha having completed the killing of the Bambis. There's a beautiful shot where we start from Yuha's palace, inside the room, and we zoom out all the way to the entrance, and the screen flips to the side. It's really cool, really awesome, and that is where the episode ends. So episode 40, even though I thought the production level of episode 40 wasn't as high as 39, and it was, in my opinion, one of the lower episodes from a storyboarding perspective, obviously because Murata was on it, go figure, but the contents of the episode were extremely engaging, and so I'm going to give this one an 8.5 out of 10. So it was still a good episode, but really the content carried hard, if I'm being honest with you. So I'll leave you guys there with that. I really enjoyed this episode. I'm going to have my full Cour 3 review up for you soon, probably in the next few days or so, and so wait for me until then. I know that there's a new trailer or teaser for Cour 4 that came out. Tomorrow, you'll get a video for that. Today, let's just take care of the episodes that we got. So, let me know what you think in the comment section down below, and I will see you in the next Rebirth video. This is your boy, signing out. Take care, guys. Happy New Year. Peace out.